afternoon and welcome to PWN Global's International Women's Day webinar. This is our gift for you today. And as you probably all know, International Women's Day 2020 campaign is around each for equal. And I'm just going to read this to you because this is what it says on the International Women's Day website. So individually, we're all responsible for our own thoughts and actions all day, every day. And we can actively choose to challenge stereotypes, fight bias, and broaden perceptions, improve situations, and celebrate women's achievement. Collectively, each one of us can help create a gender equal world. So for 2020 International Women's Day, PWN Global wanted to bring you a demonstration of a professional couple who we've had the pleasure to have met in the last 12 months. And these two people, for me, seamlessly manage their professional, family, and personal careers with absolute ease. I'm pretty sure it hasn't always been that way. I'm pretty sure, you know, we're looking at a couple who have learnt along the way. So on your screen there, you will see that we have Lisa Levey, and Lisa runs a company called Genderworks. She also wrote a book in 2012 called The Libra Solution, which explores the benefits of gender equality and the obstacles and enablers to making gender equality a reality whilst raising children, which we all know what a challenge that can be. And with her, Lisa has her husband, Bryan. And Bryan, for those of you who have been following our Gender Balance Leadership Awards that we kicked off last year, Bryan was the winner of our first Manbassador of the Year award. And I hope we touch on that later on because I know both of them are very proud that Bryan has taken that award away. And Bryan runs a business, or is a VP of engineering for a business called IntervalZero. So he's in the tech industry. And whilst juggling his role as a father and a passionate advocate of gender balance, he manages things at work and in the home. So I'm going to go straight into welcoming you guys. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. I just want to say we're really delighted to be here and to be sharing something that's a true passion for both of us. And I also just want to thank PWN for recognizing the importance of the balance that I've lived in my life with the Manbassador Award. That was something that was very special for me. So
great, thank you very much. And you know, it's great to have you here. So I'm going to kick off. I think it'd be nice to do this in sort of an interview style, and I've got a few questions here that I'd like to put to both of you. So the theme for International Women's Day in 2020 is each for equal. And I just wanted to know, you know, what does that theme mean for both of you this year?
Well, I'm sorry, the slides are going forward too quickly. No, I think for me, each for equal, it just represents all the different roles I play as a person. So as a dad, as a husband, as a VP of engineering, as an over-the-hill soccer player, which I very much enjoy, as an enthusiastic poker player. And right now I'm doing mentoring of 13-year-olds at our church. So for me, it means that I can do all of those things without restrictions based upon gender. And, you know, for people listening, that may seem really easy for a white male that, you know, I've got all of these options. And that's true. I mean, compared to some of my female counterparts, it is much easier for me. But I will say that in every role I play, there are assumptions and expectations based solely on my gender. So, Lisa, how about you?
Well, it makes me think of when I first got into this work. In my very first career, I was in money management and worked for an investment management firm. And I went into the work world thinking there were no issues around gender. To my mind, it was really around getting the right credentials. And if you did, then, you know, you could play, so to speak. And so it was very strange and difficult at times to see there were some very strange gender dynamics. But the other thing for me was really not gendered at all, which was the sense of, people playing games with their time to look committed. The whole sort of work-life balance issue came up as, it wasn't okay to say I have other parts of my life that are important. And this was long before we had children, and, but I was always kind of an eclectic personality and had lots of things that were important to me. So I really felt like I wanted to basically, create healthier work environments. And then something that happened was that I saw this article talking about a new vision of corporate America, and it was really talking about how we need to evolve the workplace. And I felt like, wow, that's something that, is really important to me. One of the things that, I want to flip the slide to the next one. You see our picture of the elephant. What part of the gender equality elephant do you touch? And part of what I've learned over many years thinking about and working in this field and just living my life is that it's complicated and that there's a lot of pieces to the elephant. And we'll be referring back to that a little bit later. But I think it's easy for us to all come from our one piece and not really understand the extent to which it is it's an ecosystem, and that it's involved in so many things, everything from career decision making, to how we raise our kids, to how we manage money, to how we use our resources. So anyway, that's sort of a big piece of the puzzle. The last thing I wanted to say, because it is International Women's Day, is that my learning, again, through a long period of time, is there's so many ways that the women's movement has been mischaracterized. And I think a lot of people think about it as, it was all about women's choice to work inside the home or not. And I think that's a piece of a much bigger puzzle. But the real goal was much broader and more inclusive. And I think it was really all about how do we change workplaces and family structures so that women and men are not constrained by gender. And, I think of it as sort of shackles, that there's all these norms that come with gender that restrict our freedom and our choices. And I think that was the true essence of the women's movement, was really about how do we make this better and different for women and men. So
Right.
Anyway, a little bit of thought about that.
So that's our critical message for Each for Equal, that this is about how do we make things better for women and for men, and I think we forget that sometimes. So I'm going to go back to Bryan now. PWN has in the past 5 years really started to look at how we can engage men in the gender conversation, because so often when we talk about gender equality, I say we very broadly, not me personally and not PWN. We sometimes think it's in inverted commas, women's problem. It's women's problem. They need to resolve it. They've got the issue with it. So I just wondered, I'm interested in understanding from a male perspective, what's your interest, Bryan, in motivating people and supporting gender equality? What makes this really important for you personally?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so really quickly, I think we have a slide here that is our family. So one of the huge motivations for me has always been family. I will go ahead and stop showing the screen for now and just talk. So my story really goes back to my father, who died. He was a college professor at a small town in Kentucky, and he had always been speaking with my mom about all of the things they were going to do when he retired. And, he was somewhat a workaholic. He'd come home from teaching and then be grading papers when we had real papers at the table in the kitchen. And 2 years before retirement, he passed away of colon cancer. And it was a huge wake-up call for me. I was in my early 20s at that point. I had just started my career, and it sort of symbolized, don't wait to do everything. You've got to have more balance in your life, because it can be short, and don't put off those things. So, you have to be responsible, but think about, how you want to live your life. And shortly thereafter, I met Lisa, and that is the second key to my having a passion for this area, was that she made it very clear early on that if we were going to have children, that she wasn't going to do it alone. And my feeling was great. I mean, I missed a lot with my dad because he was working a lot, and that was one of the decisions I had already made. So, we had a lot of discussions about when and how, and also about how we share that. I mean, what does it really mean to share the responsibilities at home, and also the financial responsibilities of having careers. So I think that's what motivates me to spread the gospel, so to speak, and just say this has been a huge benefit for me.
Okay, super. And Lisa, can you tell us more about what made you want to get involved in this area? Obviously, you have got the Genderworks business, which the focus is making sure that men are represented in the whole gender debate, and making sure that their needs are being listened to as well. So a lot of people might say, oh, well, men get everything. But as Bryan has just pointed out, we're coming to an age now where men are feeling able to speak up and say, well, actually, it's not all it's cracked up to be. I want to spend time with my family. I want to take equal responsibility for raising my children. But I find that difficult in a society that we live in. So Genderworks is working towards breaking down those stereotypes, if I understand correctly.
So I'll give you the kind of quick sweep of things in terms of, sort of my road. I really consider it a learning journey of a lifetime. And I think I was mentioning before that, I really started my professional career thinking, oh, gender is, not an issue anymore. And I think it was really through the experience of then that article I mentioned. The article was talking about people who were working to evolve work environments, both for women, but also because just the demographics of family were changing so much. And for me, that was like a light bulb moment. Like, that is what I really want to do. And so, thus began the journey of doing this kind of work. And I spent many years. The starting point was really looking at work-life issues. Working for a consulting company and consulting on work-life issues for large global companies. And through that, quickly saw some of the things that were similar and different about how women and men approached things. And one of them that was really striking was how, for women, the whole decisions around career and family were all kind of one of a piece, if you will, that they were very reciprocal and they influenced one another. And for men, their kind of model was much more one of compartmentalization, sort of, this is one piece and then this is the other piece. So that's something I really observed, kind of became a very clear pattern. And then from that, I moved into doing a lot of work around women's leadership. Things like, women's networks and women on corporate boards, that kind of thing. And then that brought in to be really diversity of all kinds. And one of the roles that I had at one point was leading an employee network practice where we were creating all different kinds of, or helping companies create all different kinds of employee networks. So women's networks is where it started, but then networks around race or ethnicity or military status. And one of the ones that I remember is, this was my early days of learning about LGBT issues. And really, I was helping a big pharmaceutical company launch an LGBT network. And that's when I was really first even learning about the term and the concept of transgender. And when I think of that, like how much has changed to my mind a great way over those years, but that I feel like there's so many people now I know who are very directly touched by, have transgender children or nephews or whatever. And so anyway, it kind of cascaded from work life to really looking at gender to looking at diversity more broadly. And then the last piece around focusing on men has really been, I started doing research around male ally groups about 5 years ago. And it was really, and also the experience of talking to lots of men over this time. I mean, I did a lot of employee research and really learning and getting a much more three-dimensional picture of their challenges and frustrations and priorities and et cetera. And through that, really saw, you know, that there's an area here that we haven't really addressed very well in terms of trying to create greater diversity, and that is how do we coach and mentor and support men to really know how to do that better. And there's reasons why they often don't know how to do that better. So anyway, I'll just kind of leave it at that point, but it's been kind of this long journey.
Okay, so a lifetime's work by the sounds of it, and still plenty more to do.
Mm-hmm.
Bryan, just moving on to you as somebody who's managed men and women over many years in your career,
Mm-hmm.
what are the differences that you've observed, if any?
No, I've observed quite a number of them, but I'm just going to preface this with, you know, a thought that it's hard to speak about this topic sometimes because we make sweeping statements about groups. I mean, you've already mentioned stereotypes, and something that, you know, Lisa, you know, brought to my attention is, you know, there's a term archetype, which is sort of the breed standard, and it says, you know, this is the standard person, but, you know, there's a huge continuum of, you know, different traits around that. So if you're a dog breed, you know, this one might be a little taller or wider or bigger or whatever. And it's just, hey, here's what we think of as the standard, which is the archetype. And I think too often we just look at stereotypes, which is saying everybody's like this. So when I'm speaking more of an archetype. I know that there's a huge range of different characteristics with people. So I'll give a couple of quick stories. One is when I was very early on in my management career, I was managing a technical support team, and there was a woman and a man on the team. And as a young manager, my job is to motivate them, you know, make them feel good about what they're doing. And I learned very quickly that for the woman, it was caring for the customer and making sure that they had what they needed. And for the man, it was the slickest technical solution you could figure out. So if I said to the man, boy, the customer was really happy with that solution, he'd be like, who cares? You know, that's no big deal. But if I said that to the woman, she'd be like, oh, I'm so glad. And vice versa. If I said to the woman, and they were both fantastic. I mean, she was incredibly, good technically, and he was good with customers too. But it was more trying to do that rather than what was important to them. So it was a real learning experience for me early on about sort of those differences, and those are more of the stereotypical differences with men and women. And then more recently, once again, this happened to be a support team. There were a couple of male individuals on it, and they had just very different work personalities in the way they would do things, the way they approach problems. And it was, I don't know whether it was competition, it may have been competition, mano a mano, but there was no generosity of spirit between them. That it wasn't like, we're a team, we're going to help out, which is what I was always preaching, you know, this is a team. And so for my next hire, I hired a woman into the team. And the whole dynamic changed completely. I mean, it was quite eye-opening. I had hoped it would happen, but all of a sudden, there was sort of this buffer, and, you know, we can work together, and hey, why don't I take that, you know, problem from you and I'll handle it? And oh, well, that was kind of neat. We'll continue to do that. So it's just, you know, seeing that type of change in the workplace has really, you know, meant something to me. So my biggest learning, I think, from being a manager for so many years is everybody is different. They're unique. But it's also learning about my blind spots. I mean, I think that we all look at situations and we don't see the full situations there. You know, we see them through our lenses. And so for me, you know, gender diversity in the workforce is as much about me learning to see the differences and understand them And Lisa and I have a funny story when we're talking about blind spots. We were at her sister's wedding, and about 2 weeks later, there was a video that we were watching of the wedding. It's like, oh, well, this is great. And the video panned down, and it showed the feet of people dancing. And Lisa goes, oh, there's Liz. I'm like, what? Oh, those were the shoes she was wearing. I know that's who she is. I'm like, I mean, talk about blind spots. There is no way in the world I would have ever noticed something like that. So we have, each have unique views on the world. So.
Well, I have a good exercise that used with clients around this issue of a blind spot. So can we go to the next one that I'm going to have you folks get to give it a try? So, so here are the instructions. And for those of you who are watching this afterwards, pause for a moment and just do it. It's pretty fun. So the idea is you want to put your hand over your right eye, and then you want to look with your left eye at the red dot. And the idea is you look at the red dot and you keep going closer and closer, very slowly, and you see if anything happens to the blue line. And so that's it. You put your hand over your right, you look at the red dot with your left eye, and you get closer and closer and notice if there's anything going on with the blue line.
Ooh.
So, this is one of these many fun exercises they have to sort of demonstrate for people. So what happens is that the blue line joins and becomes literally it's going straight across. And why that's important is that, so when we talk about blind spots, what's interesting is it physiologically is a biological thing, so that there's a part of your eye, it's called blind spot because it's where the nerve apparently goes into the brain, and so your eye cannot see there. There's and that's why when you do it, it's like there's this one point that it happens, and if you keep going, it disappears. There's this place where you truly can't see it. So there's that sort of biological part, but then from sort of a neuroscience perspective, blind spot is more about your thinking patterns. And so what we know is that we all have way more stimulus coming at us than we could ever process. And so what we all do is we filter in and filter out, and you filter in the things that are interesting to you, have relevance in your life, connect to something that's happened to you before, and you filter out really the rest of it. And so part of why that's so important is because, to realize we all have blind spots. Blind spots are universal experience. They're not about good people and bad people. What you decide to do with that is a different matter, but this really is part of the human condition. And it's also realizing that what you're seeing is literally a partial view for all of us. And, it's so much influenced by your own life experience. And one of the things I think about is that, so I'm someone who has very good face recognition, and our younger son is amazing at his face recognition from the time he was really little. And I joke with Bryan, like, he walked by like a friend who doesn't even see him. I'm like, what's that like in the world? Whereas if he sees a number sequence, boom, he's right on it. And that may or may not make it into my filter. So this idea that we all have blind spots, and I was at this professional meeting a few weeks ago for the Human Resource Leadership Forum. It's this group of senior HR folks, and there was a great speaker, this African-American woman, talking about unconscious bias and, things related to diversity. And so she had this one exercise she had us do, and you could circle all of the things that characterized who you were. So, things like I'm a youngest child, I'm a middle child, I'm an oldest child, or, I'm a parent, I'm not a parent. And so what happened is after we did this exercise, people had the chance to get up and share, some thoughts and experiences with it. And to my mind, some of the comments showed a blind spot for her, which was she shared that she was not a parent and she was not married. And so one woman got up and said that I was really surprised that stepmother wasn't one of the choices because I'm a stepmother and that's a big part of my life. And then another woman got up and said, you know, you have the LGBT, you know, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, but I'm the parent of a transgender child, and that's a huge part of my life identity, and I don't see that on there. And so it was this interesting moment for me as I'm taking it all in, saying, you know, that is not as refined in her direct life experience at this moment. And she told us about going to, I think it was Ghana, and you know, it was the first place she's ever been where everybody was Black. And she said, so just that was an interesting change. But then what she found out was in that culture, to not be a parent was a really big deal, especially a mother. So everybody was so focused on that, like, you're not a mother? How could you not be a mother? So anyway, it's just to say we all have blind spots and they're all characterized by our life experiences, and to sort of realize that and exercise, you know, and be cognizant of that. The other point is with the exercise, we see this idea of you fill in, you know, your brain fills in. And to me, that's like a perfect metaphor for stereotypes. So that is, I think of it, you know, you meet someone, you learn 3 facts about them, you know, they grew up here, they went to that school, and they did something else, and now you filled in their whole life story. You know everything about them. That's what a stereotype is, versus really understanding about them. So anyway, I think that it's just a good concrete way to think about it, and how it's an important part of this whole issue around gender equality and equality of all sorts.
Yeah, I really like when you go into the neuroscience part of that. I find that really interesting because, you know, when we all examine our own behavior, as you say, the amount of information coming at us on a daily basis, we have to create these shortcuts. But immediately as you're creating those shortcuts, you're putting things through your lens, and you are creating effectively biases of a type, regardless of what it is, if it's to do with your favorite brand of ice cream, or, you know, things that are much more important.
Really important things for some people, like me.
So Bryan, I'm going to come back to you again on your personal story, because I know when you took the role, or when you applied for, when you put your nomination in for being Manbassador of the Year last year, I remember receiving that application amongst probably 20 applications. And I remember reading it, and every time I got to a new line, I was like, wow, wow, wow. And my jaw was dropping more and more. And it wasn't so much, how to say this, it wasn't that I was blown away necessarily by what you were doing, although it was phenomenal. It was the fact that it had been articulated so well, and that you were willing to share that on such a personal level, whereas all of the other applications were very focused on what they'd done in the workplace to make sure that there was gender equality rolling out. So I wanted to ask you, you know, your personal story of being such an involved father, you know, definitely played a role in you being selected as our Manbassador of the Year last year. So I'd like you to tell us a bit about your experience of being an involved father, because when we spoke before this session, you told me some interesting stories of some things that have happened to you along the way. So I'd be interested for you to share that with our audience.
Certainly. So I'll start by saying that for each of our kids, I took a lengthy paternity leave. So I was part of the baby boot camp, you know, understanding all of the things that you need to go through to get up and running. And then for the first 8 years, until both kids were out of kindergarten, I worked a 4-day work week and was home one day with the kids. And Lisa also worked a 4-day work week and was home one day. So we had, you know, a daycare day, and then a daddy day, and then a daycare day, and then a mommy day, and then a daycare day. So, you know, getting a chance to do that on my own, I learned a lot of lessons. But from sort of a gender-based view, it was really different, the dichotomy of responses that I got as when I was home on my daddy day. Either, a lot of times I was a star, in the middle of the day, and I'm at the playground with my son, and I'm a star, but it was a little sort of patronizing as well, like, oh, you're playing at it. Isn't it nice that daddy is babysitting and things like that? Yeah, I mean, it was just very different. So somewhat feeling like a second-class citizen when I would do this, meaning, I would tell.
How old are your kids now, Bryan? How old are your kids now? How long are we talking about?
Oh, so this is a long time ago. So one has just graduated from college and one has just started college. So,
okay.
So they're much older at this point. But at any rate, so at that point, I would tell the doctors to call me, and they'd call Lisa, and I would tell daycare to call me if there was a problem, and they'd call Lisa, and people would call up for play dates, and I'd say, oh yeah, and they'd say, well, can I speak to Lisa? And it was just amazing how much you have to push against the norms when that's you're in somebody else's environment, and the infrastructure around raising children, the norm is still around mothers doing much of that work, and many times, as everybody knows, they do both sides of it. So anyway, it was just a true experience for me to see that difference and feel not empowered as I did in work. And actually, Lisa has sort of a chart on this.
It's just reminding me. To me, the first moment I ever saw anything about men's experience of gender in that way was when we were planning our wedding. We together planned our wedding, and you would go to these wedding shows, and they would not even look at Bryan, like he wasn't even there. And it was such a weird experience, like of being invisible, being treated like you're invisible. So anyway, to me, that journey kind of goes way back of starting to think, oh, wow, that's weird. And, sort of starting to notice, what is it? So Bryan.
So really quickly, I forgot to show this slide. So when you were asking me what it was like, it's like, it depends upon who you ask. And we love this slide.
That's the greatest slide. We're huge dog people.
So your view of things really is dependent upon what situation you are and, who you're asking about it. So
I just love that slide.
All right.
So adorable.
So now we're to this one.
So Bryan's had a chart. I like to think of it as a model, but anyway, it's this idea of over many years. Again, I was taking it all in and seeing this and having all these conversations, and then just observing in the world, things that, again, probably a lot of other people would never notice. And it was strange for me, this whole issue that Bryan was talking about of, like, everyone, I was the one, like, as the woman, I was the one when it came to the kids. And it was so strange for me because that was really not how we did it. But even like good friends of ours who are very progressive, et cetera, would be can I speak to Lisa? And Bryan would say, well, what do you need? I'll just have Lisa call when she gets in. And that was a very strange experience for us. So we see it sort of wide and deep. Let's just put it that way. And oops, what was that?
Use these if you want to.
Oh, okay. So anyway, wanted to talk a little bit about this kind of model that I have developed. And first, I wanted to give you one sort of really big moment that helped to put this into, that made this clear, I guess. So after I wrote the book, this journalist was interviewing me, and she was sharing that I think she was probably 10, 15 years older than I was. And that, she was sort of really that first group of women coming into the workforce as professionals and in management. And I think she worked in the advertising field and just, always having to push for legitimacy. And she shared something about, she was surprised, but when her and her husband had a child, she found she wanted to be in control of all that. And like, she always felt like, oh, I want somebody who shares this with me. and then this, powerful sense of I'm going to control that. And I think for me, my experience of it was I was so glad to be in the trenches with someone. I think I never wanted to be in the trenches alone. And for me to have like a thought partner, hey, what'd you try? This is what I tried. It didn't work that well. Or, okay, that seems to work. Okay. That was such a positive thing for me. So that was interesting for me to hear that kind of different point of view. But then I said to her, well, why do you think that is? What do you think happened or switched that you went from feeling one way and then, that kind of the goalpost moved? And she described it as kind of what I just said, like, I'm the one. All of a sudden, I had this child and I'm the one. I'm the expert. Everyone defers to me. They think I'm the person who knows all about this. And she said, I really think part of it was power. I had been working so hard to feel any sense of power. And all of a sudden, it was clear that I had all the power in the world here and my husband didn't. So this was like a light bulb again going off in my head. And so this model, let's see. Okay, if you think about if you look at just in a simple grid of women and men and home and work, and by the way, we realize there's a whole continuum of gender these days, and this is really simplifying it down. But what we really see is in the home, women, again, they have this instant power and credibility that basically in many homes that the women's preferences are the preference, whether you want the house neat or not, or the kids have to be well dressed. She tends to have more influence over that. And I think we have a lot of media characterization and stuff of like the bumbling dads, which is very, disempowering. And then if you look at men and work, it's kind of the flip of that. They go in, they're expected to be the leaders. They're expected to be there. They get better rewards in terms of opportunities and money and the whole thing. And then also, again, the norms of behavior are much more their norms of behavior. And then, you probably guess where this is going. Men and home, again, they're sort of fighting for this sense of having competency. And we know a couple that has had a much more kind of egalitarian approach like ours. And they tell this great story about, and the mom who felt and feels very passionately about this, one of the first times she went out and left the child's home, she leaves a list for him. And he looks at her and takes the list and he rips it up in front of her and throws it away. He's like, I don't need a list. It was such a moment, like, again, getting to the blind spot piece of things. And then if you look at working women, we all know that story, and that women have really struggled and continue to work really we're all working very hard to get to a much more gender equal world. I also just heard something on the National Public Radio today, which was fascinating to me about women in prison. They see even women in prison are penalized much more harshly for very basic, like, not big deal things like insolence, like they swear or something, or for taking a piece of cornbread when they're eating that they're not supposed to have. And so again, it's like this standard we have that, women aren't supposed to push back on that. And anyway, it's endlessly fascinating to me. Anyway, so this, for me, this model helped to conceptualize and bring together something that I never really thought of it that way. What's most important to me about it is we see how this reinforces the gender inequality. So for instance, men get, bigger rewards in the workplace. So they tend to prioritize work more and it feels more comfortable for them. They're not taking leaves to be at home when their kids are little, so they're not learning the competence in that space. So then they feel compared to mom, who's been there every minute, who's gone up the learning curve, they feel like they don't have the skill, and then they draw back, and then she may be frustrated. So we see that whole thing happens. And then, when women come back after maternity leave, often you know, she's trying so hard to do it all, and then she's the one flexing often, much more than the dad. Again, these are big picture. These are not talking about every family. So, but you can see how all of our behaviors are driving towards keeping us right where we are and not sort of breaking open these, you know, sort of creating new models that really work for the individuals in the family. And every time I hear a story that demonstrates that, so a woman talking about that, you know, her husband grew up in a family with very traditional roles, and she's now working outside the home. And then all the other, you know, the other brothers have wives who are not working outside the home. And they were all talking at some holiday thing, and she heard her husband saying something about like, I'm so glad that my wife works because it's a lot of pressure to be the one having to, you know, support the family. And she kind of overheard this, and she said, I was so happy. Like in a way I couldn't believe it, but I was so happy. And, you know, to me, it's that. It just gives us more choices and more well-being in the world.
So looking at this, as you talk about this model, Lisa, it strikes me that, you know, this cycle, these inbred, you know, when you talk about the power and the privilege and this instant power and instant credibility that we get, at some point this cycle starts somewhere. So do either of you, it may sound like a really basic question, but where do you see this cycle beginning? You know, what are the different sources of power and privilege, and you know, where does that start depending on our gender? Do you have a viewpoint on that?
Well, I grew up as a boy, so yeah. So real quick, how are we doing with time? So
we've got about 10 minutes left to go, so
we should probably speak a little bit more quickly. Okay. So really quickly, growing up a boy, everything was about competition. It was about always moving. It was about only reading when I had to do it for school, or my mom told me I needed to do it. And
some boys like to read, by the way.
I know. But the bottom line is a lot of the social engagement that, you know, I see at the office, I started doing very young. And two quick examples of the differences. So, you know, my family, I have 2 older brothers, very competitive. I was playing croquet for the first time with Lisa after she was part of our family, and I hit her ball. And if anybody knows croquet, you know, you've got 2 choices. You can either take 2 shots or you can send the person and take 1 shot. So of course she was doing well. I sent her into the weeds, and she was astounded. She was like, what are you doing? You sent me. I'm like, yeah, it's a game. She's like, no, you sent me. I am your fiance. You can't send me. It's like, of course I can't. So for me, it was like a no-brainer. For her, it was a slap in the face.
Oh boy, I used to remember that like yesterday.
It was quite something. Once again, and the other quick example of just, you know, how people respond to environments. We have a ping pong table at our office, and we've got a ping pong ladder. And the other day, I was playing somebody, and basically I said, you know, well, this isn't, you know, that important. I'm going to, you know, just sort of move up the ladder, and then I'm going to challenge something way down low because I want to get them more involved. I want them to move towards the top, then people will challenge them. And they weren't good at challenging. And the person I was with, who was this young man, was once again astounded. Why would you do that? Why would you challenge somebody below you? And I said, to get them involved. But that's not going to get you to the top. And I said, no. And he said, but that's the most important thing. Being at the top, getting to the top. So, you know, once again, all of these things are reinforced, you know, going through, and it's just part of your life. So as a male.
One of the most interesting parts about, I think, anyone being married is, you know, you go into their whole family dynamic and see how their family does it differently. And then if you have kids, then, you know, depending on the gender of the kids, etc., you're observing all them. And we have 2 boys. So I say I've lived in a gender laboratory for over 20 years. And, you know, it's, again, like another source. I have so many sources of information about this. and sort of seeing the differences and, proclivities or tendencies or whatever. And there's some, I want to show you something about, I use the language playbooks, but like what we're taught as kids about the way to behave depending on gender. And I wish this was my brilliant work, but it's not. It's this woman, Pat Heim, who wrote a book called Hardball for Women. And Tammy Hughes also is someone that is the president of the company and works very closely with her. And when I saw this, it was so eye-opening to me. Again, it's like another model that brings together something and you go, that makes so much sense. So, if you look at the different, oops, wait a second.
No.
Oh, let's see.
Sorry. There it is.
There we go. Again, if you're, big picture, not every girl, not every boy, but there are profound differences in what we learn. And I think probably the most basic from my own experience and from, talking and researching this for years is that for women, power is all about equality. We're always trying to equalize power, and that, power is something you share. And for men, it is much more this hierarchy, and you're very aware of who's above and below me in the hierarchy, and it's good to be higher in the hierarchy, as the person Bryan was talking about his office said. So then if we look at, how you communicate with other people, like for women, they think about competition as can be a source of conflict and can be a way that could damage relationships. And for men, it's like, this is fun, right? This is a game. I love to do this.
Like sending your fiance.
Exactly. And, this idea for, girls are socialized. You want to be liked. That's really important. For boys, this sense of, I'd rather be respected than liked. Like, respect is the end all and be it all. How do you operate in a team? I think girls are taught, you do your best for the team, and boys are taught, what? It doesn't matter if you're, the worst player on the team. Then your job is just to keep score or go get the water or whatever, and you're supposed to just be like, okay. And your goal is always to move up the hierarchy in the team, and the people at the top are the ones who get the rewards. This is not how women do it. Conversations for women are much more oriented towards relationship building, and anything that hurts that is a negative thing. And for men, their conversations are much more focused on, getting stuff done. So we don't have to go in anymore. The point is, you can just see literally some of these things are diametrically opposed, or all of them, really what we're learning about how to be in the world. The important part about is, if you look at the boys list and you think for a moment or two what the workforce looks like, you'll see those are a map. Those completely map. And I wrote an article, I don't know, a year or so ago about, why women continue to feel like a square peg in a round hole. So much about the environment are these rules of engagement that are not yours, and you're not talking from your own playbook. Okay. So anyway, that was sort of a powerful way for me to understand it better.
Yeah, and as you say, when you put that that table up, they really are diametrically opposed things. I'm interested because, I think you've almost answered the question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Why do you think we're still in this day and age having so much difficulty in advancing gender balanced leadership and having more women in leadership roles? More women than ever are graduating now. Proportionally more women than men are graduating now. So at some point there's going to have to be surely a tipping point. Why do you think it is taking so much time? It's like turning the Titanic.
Yeah, in some ways it is. And I think this is a really important question. And I think it's primarily, if you think about what we talked about earlier, environments that are work environments, it's more set up for males. And blind spots that prevent us from seeing the holes in those environments. So, you know, I think a lot of it is that, you know, men just don't see it in many cases, and it's invisible to them. You know, they think they're doing the right thing, but they don't have, and perhaps they don't understand the woman's playbook. That they've got a playbook. They say, this is the way we're moving forward, and it makes sense. We all value our own playbook. It makes sense to us. So if we don't step back and say, what am I missing? Then we're going to keep going with what we've got. I also think at this point that men feel to some extent lumped together as part of the problem. It's like, okay, so, you know, we've talked to a lot of men, and it's like, you know, well, I'm the problem, and, you know, I've already been declared the problem, and so I should just shut up. You know, I've just got to step back because I'm not really being heard. I'm just being judged that I'm not doing the right thing. And as we all know, men struggle, not always, but many times, asking for help. So, you know, I think there are a lot of ways in which, you know, the system is set up, and unless we really look for those biases and those blind spots and listen to men and get them involved, men have to be involved, or we won't make progress. So
we're coming to the end of our session together. I mean, I can sense that we could talk about this stuff for hours and hours and hours, and it's really interesting to have both of your perspectives on this call today. Lisa, do you want to wrap up with maybe a few comments about what you see as the road forward in moving towards gender balance in the workplace and in society as a whole?
Well, I started GenderWorks, and Bryan is working with me 1 day a week in the business, really because I saw there was this gaping hole about engaging men in this. We have all these initiatives and things, but men are usually not that involved, and there's a lot of trepidation men are feeling now. So, you know, we're really working with them to support them, mentor them, coach them, and let them do it in a way that feels safe. And then I think once they feel confident, then they become real champions. I think there's a lot of men out there who really want to do better at this, but they don't necessarily know how. I think the other part is we have the elephant back, but just this idea of we all only touch one part of it or some parts of it. And to me, that just argues for listening more and for, you know, being more humble and for assuming good intent and for, you know, sort of realizing that it's together, just this, you know, each for equal, it's through together that we're going to change this and make it something different. And at the end of the day, you know, I think what I talk about in my book quite a bit, the benefits of gender equality are broad. They're not just for women. There's huge research about how men benefit, how children benefit, how companies benefit, how societies benefit. So, you know, to my mind, creating more gender equality in the world is a way that lifts boats and helps so many stakeholder groups, not just women by a long shot.
I think that's a great place to end the session. Now, I know we've got another slide coming up here that has some information. Lisa has kindly offered to give us a free copy of a chapter of her book, The Libra Solution. And also there's a couple of references to some nice YouTube videos there that would be great for you all to look out. If you are watching on YouTube today, just go below here, and in the description box for this video, you'll find the links where you can just click straight through and go to those links. Personal message from PWN Global. Thank you to Lisa and Bryan. You can see how you can contact them there on that last slide. So if you'd like to continue the conversation, or you have any questions that you want to ask them that we haven't really covered today, and we've covered a lot, please do so. And then last word from yeah, and the last word from PWN Global. Please take a moment to check out our website, which is www.pwnglobal.net. I'll put that down there as well if you're watching on YouTube. We would love you to find out more about our community and what we do for advancing gender balanced leadership. And we also, if you're working in this space, we encourage you to look out for our Gender Balanced Leadership Awards, which in 2020 are taking place on the 12th of November in Dublin. And we invite you to nominate yourself or somebody who is doing good work in this area for one of our awards. There's a whole list of them on our awards website, link below as well. There's going to be thousands of links down here.
It was so much fun. It's so much fun.
It's a good night. It's a good celebratory night. So I just thank you both again. I wish you both a very happy International Women's Day. Continue doing what you're doing. And we look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Rebecca.